Thank you all. Thank you, Rob. And thanks, Aegis, for the opportunity to talk. So I'm going to talk about, I was asked to talk about the bricks and mortar, the infrastructure Reflux Center. And I currently operate out of St. Luke's Health in the Woodlands. It's just north of Houston, about 40 minutes north of downtown Houston. Here's my disclosure. I am a proctor for the Lynx device, J&J Ethicon. But since I'm talking more about building a reflux institute, hey, building a reflux institute won't really have anything to do with this talk. So that's our hospital. My partner used the same picture, I think, on the previous presentation. So that's the hospital we have. It's a very nice man-made lake there with a fountain. That consists of where we primarily operate. So when we looked at it and said, okay, so I'll tell you this, like what Rob said, this is more of a talk. And so I'm going to tell you my journey on building a reflux institute. And I'm glad Dr. Buckley's here because he was very instrumental in helping us build this reflux institute when we first came in. So I retired from the Army in 2017. After 21 years. And then I grew up in Houston, and so looking at different offers, talked to the people at the Woodlands. And one of the things is like, we need to come up with something that's, not just a surgeon coming in, but what can we do different? What can we brand? What can we set apart? So we talked about reflux, and a good friend of mine's a pulmonologist there. And he's like, we have surgeons that do reflux surgery, but we don't really have like a brand, an institute, and that's kind of what we talked about. So when you look at this, does it have to be a brick and mortar structure? I know the title is brick and mortar. In this day and age, everything is done by apps and Zoom and all sorts of other stuff. So I'm here to tell you that, we do not have a brick and mortar institute. We don't have a big building with a sign. What we have is what we call the virtual institute, so that we try to provide all the functions in a one-stop shop, but do it in a way where we're not all under one building or one sign. So looking at that, so we had to come up with a name. This was actually one of the, I can't remember who came, it wasn't me. I'm not this creative, but someone came up with, and we said, we need to come up with letters and that. So we came up with Harper and Acid Reflux Institute, or Habari. And the funny story is one of our managers who was over this, we kept saying Habari, and she thought that it was an actual thing, so she's Googling it, and I can't remember what she came out with. But so this is, you have to set up a brand, and you have to set up for something that can distinguish yourself. And then you have to look at the members. Who are your members going to be for your institute? It can't just be surgeons. It doesn't work. So my first introduction into the links was when I went and saw Dr. Buckley's program down in Round Rock at the time. I know now he's in Austin. And their talk that they gave was from him as a surgeon and from a GI doctor. And that's what you have to have. You have to have that partnership. It can't just be a surgeon talking to a whole bunch of primary cares and saying this is the thing to do, because you need that balance. And what we wanted to do is not develop an institute that is just surgery, but it was both surgery and medical and all around. And so we got our medical group gastroenterologists and surgeons. A navigator, I think a navigator is key. You have to have someone there. We were able to hire a nurse practitioner who's a navigator, and she's still with us. And it's key in keeping track of the patients, the flow, and everything else, and making sure that everything is working smoothly. And then you have to have a web presence, right, in this day and age. It's not just advertising with hard printed material, but it's web presence. So we had to get someone. And at the time, we did have a marketer that was in the hospital that had an office right there in admin that we got to buy in and really create that web presence. So after all this, we discussed it. We went with the Virtual Institute and then kind of looked at what basic equipment that you need. So that's our website, the Harper and Acid Reflux Institute at the Woodlands Hospital. If you type in Harper and Acid Reflux Institute Woodlands, it kind of pops up. That's actually a clinic office, which is right next to that, literally about, 50 yards from that hospital picture I showed you. And so it's really nice to be able to bounce back and forth in such a close distance. So basic equipment, when I arrived there, we only had an EGD. So the hospital did not have ways. I remember the first time I wanted to order a pH and a manometry, and they're like, okay, we have to send it out. And I'm like, what do you mean the hospital doesn't have that? So that was my first introduction. So then I worked with our GI, and that's the other thing. When you get these GI partners, when you're building an institute, you got to get someone that has an interest in reflux and interest in doing bravos and manometries. Because what I found is not all GI doctors do manometries. It's not like, when you come out as a general surgeon, you just assume, okay, everyone's going to do gallbladders, hernias, all this other stuff. Well, GIs nowadays, they don't, not all of them, most of them seems like don't do ERCPs. And so, but a lot of them, they don't do manometries or bravos. It's all what they're interested. You got to find someone. So we had someone that wanted to do it. Then we were able to get administration buy-in, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, and was able to purchase a Bravo pH and manometry. And to my amazement, back then, I think within 2 to 3 months of me getting there, they were able to buy this and get it in. And that also is due to some of the leveraging of other successful programs, which I'll also talk about. So those are the 3 basic things I think you need if you're going to do an institute. I think you should be able to perform these in your hospital right there. And if you look at the paper on the surgical endoscopy with the Society Consensus Conference, that's kind of what they do. The other ones, what about EndoFlip and high-resolution manometry? When I was starting out in 2017 building this, EndoFlip was just in its infancy. I still think right now that it's not something you have to have. Okay, I still don't have an EndoFlip, and I don't use an EndoFlip. The high resolution manometry. As long as you have a way to get a good manometry, good Bravo pH, then I think these are something that you could have if your administration wants to buy it, but it's not an absolute. The big thing also is when you have those 3 studies, like I said, I know people can argue, does everyone need a manometry before they get a toupee? Does everyone need a Bravo if they have reflux and upper GI, and it shows that you do an EGD and there's biopsies that shows obvious, esophagitis. Those are things you can argue, but those 3 basic things you should have the ability to be able to do. So when you look at that, you got to get administration buy-in, right? So you have to have frequent meetings. When I got there, and I know surgeons don't like to have meetings, but when I got there, I scheduled them, and I got on their schedule, and we got it to where the nurse manager who was over the program was there. We would get someone, hopefully the CMO. The CEO is kind of involved peripherally, but I had a really good, we have a really great CEO who is very approachable, and I could just sit there, stop him in the hallway, talk to him. And then we didn't ask for the moon. I didn't go in saying, I need an EndoFlip or I need this. I said, this is the basic thing we need, and this is why the hospital is going to get helped. And we leveraged other successes. I don't know, Dr. Buckley, you probably came 3, 4, 5 times. So frequently he would come and sit in those meetings because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, right? And so we said, look, here's this really successful program in Central Texas, and this is what they did. And it was very helpful when they came in and said, you're not going to be successful unless you have a nurse navigator. So then we were able to convince, the administration, hey, here's a great program, and they're telling us, we don't necessarily have to have all the bells and whistles, but the one thing we can't do without a nurse navigator, so that allowed us to hire that. So leverage other people's successes around there, because they can come in and say, this is where we started where you were, this is how fast we grew, this is how quickly we got patients in, and then, you got to look at the revenue and all that, and that's what they're also looking at, and how that can help. And when you just have an institute, and then you have to brand, and then you have to market. I went around when I first got there and talked to all the primary cares. I did the same thing. I copied what they did. Me and the GI doctor got together and gave a dinner seminar for primary cares, so that you get a balanced approach, right? You get the medical, and we wanted our institute to be able to do both just medical and surgical, and we wanted a one-stop shop. So what we did is we told our primary cares, everywhere I went, I told the primary care, don't worry about trying to figure out what test to order. Don't worry about who do I send this patient out to. If you have someone with reflux and they're having issues and you need help, you just send them to us and we'll take care of everything else. You just send the consult to us. We'll figure out We'll contact them. We'll set up the appointment. We'll get them to the GI doctors. We'll order the appropriate studies, and so just try to make it as easy as possible, and then get in that core group. And you got to think outside the box. Right now probably one of our higher people consult us for reflux is our pulmonologist, because they see a lot of aspiration, they see a lot of pulmonary diseases that aren't just explained about pulmonary issues. So we get a lot of that and get that group. That was a proudest moment. I don't know if it was about 3 to 6 months after I got there, we put this billboard up. And the nice thing about it is you can't see it, but the top of that building is our competitor, the Methodist Hospital, who was right there. So we had that sign right there. Subsequently, Methodist, being who they are, bought that land. Now they control the billboard, so our billboard's not there anymore. But it was great. It was right by on the way to Costco, and I got patients saying, hey, I was driving to Costco, saw the sign. My husband has bad reflux, and so, we didn't get that. So in conclusion, you got to form a good team. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a brick and mortar. It can be virtual, but it's got to be something that you provide service to the primary care, the internal medicine, or patients who come in. They want a one-stop shop where you can do that. Don't oversell to the administration. Don't ask for the moon. You got to get admin buy-in, and really important to market. Not only did they do the billboards, within the first 6 months of me being there, they did elevator wraps and all that stuff for several months and stuff. And that's what you got to get to do that. And that is my talk. Thank you very much.